When most people picture the fall of Rome, they imagine dramatic scenes, barbarian hordes, storming ancient walls, collapsing legions, assassinated emperors, the last flames of a dying empire. But the truth is far less theatrical and far more dangerous. Great civilizations rarely die from external attacks alone. They fall from rot that grows deep inside. And one of the deadliest forms of internal decay has always been the collapse of money. Rome didn't simply fall because of invaders or political chaos. It fell because the very foundation of its economy, its currency, disintegrated. And the warnings from Rome's downfall echoed loudly today for every modern nation that believes it can manipulate money without consequences. For centuries, Rome's financial heart was the silver denarius. Introduced around 211 BC, it was almost pure silver entrusted across borders. Soldiers received it as pay, merchants demanded it for trade, and ordinary citizens saved it as wealth. It wasn't just a coin, it was confidence cast in metal. The strength of the empire and the strength of its money were intertwined. As long as Rome commanded faith, the denarius was solid. But running a vast empire comes at a massive cost. Legions to pay, borders to defend, roads to maintain, rebellions to suppress. By the 2nd century AD, expenses exploded. Tax revenue couldn't keep up. So emperors reached for an old political trick. They debased the currency. Instead of raising taxes and risking revolt, they reduced the amount of silver in each coin. The transformation was dramatic. Under Augustus, Rome's first emperor, the denarius was around 95% silver. By Caracalla's time in the early 200s, that purity had dropped to nearly half. And during the stormy mid-3rd century, under Emperor Gallienus, the once solid silver denarius had less than 5% silver left. It was essentially bronze, dipped in a thin wash of silver. People didn't need economists to explain what was happening. They could feel the change in their hands. Inflation hit like a hammer. Crisis sword. A measure of wheat that once cost a single denarius now cost many times more. Soldiers demanded higher pay just to survive. Merchants refused debased coins and reverted to barter or gold. Local economies fractured because the money that held them together no longer held any trust. And as trust evaporated, emperors did the only thing they knew. They minted more coins with even less silver, hoping that quantity could replace quality. But it only accelerated the collapse, the same pattern we've seen in every inflationary crisis since. Everything came crashing down during the crisis of the 3rd century. From 235 to 284 AD, Rome spiraled through invasions, plagues, civil wars, and economic breakdown. Emperors rose and fell faster than anyone could remember. Some ruled only weeks before being murdered. But beneath the chaos was a system that had already been hollowed out. Taxes were paid in currency worth almost nothing. Farmers abandoned their land. Trade collapsed. And desperate Roman officials tried everything from brutal tax enforcement to fixed price laws to stop the bleeding. One emperor, Diocletian, tried to reverse the collapse in 301 AD by issuing the edict on maximum prices, forcing fixed prices on over 1,000 goods. Anyone who charged more could be executed. Even death couldn't force worthless money to have value. A massive black market emerged, and official trade shrank even further. People learned something every economist should know. You cannot legislate value into a broken currency. Eventually, Rome abandoned the denarius. Constantine introduced the solidus, a gold coin with staple purity. Around 312 AD, it became one of history's most successful currencies, lasting centuries in the Eastern Empire. But for the Western Empire, the damage was irreversible. The economic heart had already stopped beating. Without reliable money, they couldn't pay armies, maintain trade, or sustain trust. Rome didn't fall in a single moment. It unraveled, and currency collapse was the thread that pulled everything apart. So what does this ancient tragedy mean today? It means that every empire that destroys its currency destroys itself. Roman emperors debased coins to hide their financial weaknesses. Today, governments print money, manipulate interest rates, can inflate away debt while pretending everything is under control. But the laws of economics haven't changed. When money is corrupted, societies fracture, wealth evaporates, trust dies. History shows this again and again. After World War I, Germany printed marks to meet impossible war debts. By 1923, a loaf of bread cost billions of marks. People carried wages home in bags, but the money was worthless before they arrived. Pensioners starved, debtors escaped their obligations, while those with real assets emerged even wealthier. And the political chaos that followed opened the door to dictatorship. In the 2000s, Zimbabwe repeated the same mistake. As production collapsed and debt soared, the government unleashed the printing presses. By 2008, inflation hit an unimaginable 89.76 billion %. Prices doubled in hours. Shelves emptied. The Zimbabwean dollar died, and foreign currencies replaced it. These are extreme cases, but even stable nations follow Rome's pattern in slow motion. In 1971, the United States disconnected the dollar from gold. Since that day, the value of the dollar has been built on trust alone. Trust that the government will not print too much, but debts have ballooned. Money supply has soared, and purchasing power has steadily eroded. A dollar today buys only a fraction of what it did in 1971. The notes look the same, but the value inside them has leaked away. Governments disguise inflation behind rising wages, booming stock markets, and promises of growth. But inflation quietly steals from everyone holding cash. It is a tax without legislation, a slow confiscation of wealth. And the people who suffer most are the ones least able to protect themselves: workers, savers, pensioners. Meanwhile, the wealthy shelter their money and assets that rise with inflation. Rome's mistake was believing stability was permanent. And that is the most dangerous assumption any society can make. Romans in the 1st century laughed at the thought their money could ever fail. Germans in 1913 never imagined wheelbarrows of cash. Zimbabweans believed their independence guaranteed prosperity. Yet the same pattern replayed again and again. The collapse of money is the collapse of everything built on money: trust, trade, security, government. When currency fails, armies disband, contracts dissolve, and societies break apart. The enemies outside may strike the final blow, but the fatal wound always begins in the treasury. The real lesson is clear. History doesn't repeat, but it warns. Ignore those warnings, and history will crush you just as it crushed Rome. The crisis of the denarius wasn't just about corrupt emperors. It was about the fragile nature of money when abused by power, and that fragility still defines our world today. If this gave you a deeper understanding of how empires rise and fall, hit subscribe. History is full of answers, and together we'll uncover them.